This is Anthony Pascal.
And this is Laurie Elster, and this is the All Access Star Trek podcast. Today we have an episode of Lower Decks to review. 506, Gods and Angles. The cleverly titled Gods and Angles. But we're going to start with news and this interesting film that was released by the Roddenberry Archive. So I always have trouble explaining sort of what they are and what they're doing, so I'm going to make Tony do it.
Sure. We've been covering the Roddenberry Archive for a while. It's this kind of digital museum is almost a way I think of it, where this is Roddenberry's company. I guess Roddenberry Entertainment has teamed up with this technology company called Otoy, O-T-O-Y, and they've been recreating elements of Star Trek, mostly starships, where you could tour them virtually using an Apple Vision Pro or on the web. Hopefully they do more things in the future. And then they also have released a series of these kind of trippy short movies that's a mix of live action and CGI, featuring, former characters like Spock and Yeoman Colt, other random stuff. But this week they kind of went all out. This was kind of their magnum opus, I would say, so far. The stuff that's been done before is kind of interesting, but this week they're getting a lot of attention. This thing called Unification, which is their fourth short film. It's gotten about 500,000 views on YouTube.
And we're going to suggest that you watch it before you listen to us talk about it. So
yeah, 'cause it's so hard to hit pause, go watch it. It's on Trek Movie. It's the article called William Shatner's Captain Kirk Returns in Unification Short Film.
All right, welcome back.
There we go. I'm curious. I kind of, and I've talked to some of the people who've been involved in this, so I think I know a little more about what's going on. But I'm curious. You've just watched this thing, kind of, without a lot of context. What did you take away from it? What was your?
Obviously, a ton of really high-end creative work went into it. So I don't want to in any way diminish the production value or the endeavor itself.
I mean, it's got a score by Michael Giacchino.
It's got all kind, like Dave Blass worked on it, and all kinds of people worked on it. For me, it didn't have any emotional resonance like it did for I saw a lot of people, because it sort of took place in a vacuum, in its own way, and two, because there's almost no dialogue from some of our most celebrated talkers, Kirk and Spock.
Right.
I don't really like de-aging and CGI stuff and things like that very much.
Well, technically there's no de-aging in it. It's actually the opposite, but we'll get into that.
Right. Yes. But it didn't click for me. How about that?
I certainly admire the work. I think it's really interesting. They did this as a celebration of Star Trek Generations' 30th anniversary. So it's kind of a coda to Generations in a way where, I think Kirk is sort of resurrected, but not exactly.
Well, because it looks like somehow Gary Mitchell resurrected him or something. I don't understand the Gary Mitchell part. And then it sort of has, remember in Picard when they had Kirk's bones somewhere? I don't know.
Right. I am hoping to do a follow-up with the people behind this to have them explain certain things, which, like, why is Gary Mitchell in it? Except that, oh, look, Gary Lockwood is still alive. We could get him to, blink on screen, and then we could convert that to what he looked like, 60 years ago.
Well, Joan Collins is still alive too, just saying.
What a lot of people are taking away from this is it was an opportunity to show Kirk and Spock say goodbye. So it features Generations Kirk kind of going from the Nexus, where he sees some old friends, he sees Saavik, he sees Spock's son, and then he runs into, and this is a super deep cut,
Yes.
The Beetlejuicean, everyone remembers him, right? And it's the guy from a random episode of Discovery season 3, I think, who was from the Kelvin universe. And so I guess he's now back in the Prime universe, but also in the Nexus. I don't quote me on that. And he somehow takes Generations Kirk over through into the Kelvin universe. But first, Kirk has to go through kind of a 2001 trippy situation where he runs into two younger versions of himself.
And just stares at them a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of Kirk staring. He never says anything. There's some voiceover, but no dialogue. And then eventually we see Spock as he was seen in the Kelvin movies dying, basically, in his deathbed, looking out over a sunset, and they share a nice moment. They don't say anything. And then that's it, right? That's kind of how it ends.
Kirk grabs his... They hold hands in the same way they did in Star Trek The Motion Picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, it raises more questions for me because, if Kirk's alive, then why can't Spock be alive? Why is Spock dying? And
maybe Kirk isn't alive. He's still dead, and he's still in the Nexus, an echo of him. Who knows?
Right, but then he'd have Spock up and walking around too. So, I don't think his vision, his happy Nexus vision, would be Spock dying.
No, he went from the Nexus. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, once you get into the details, none of it makes sense. But,
right.
That's not really the point.
I also just want to point out they had a very beautiful goodbye in Star Trek 2.
That's true. I mean, I think it was one of the most expensive fan film ever made. It's comfort food for a lot of Star Trek fans. A lot of old school fans really love this thing. It just makes them feel good. Because the thing is that the quality of what they did with the CGI, because as we're saying, this isn't de-aging. So they took Sam Witwer, who we've talked about recently. He's a big Star Trek fan. He's an actor, and he performs as Kirk, and he really does the facial expressions and the way his mouth opens. That kind of Kirk. What it's hard to describe, but it's very.
I have no criticism of any of the actors or the people who made the creatives who put it together. The work they did is A+ work.
So one thing that's important that from the guys I've talked to, this is not AI. Everyone says everything's AI now. That's not what this is. That's a kind of a different technology, but does it matter? I don't know. It seems to be important to them. They call it digital makeup or something like that, but it's just the face. Everything else is practical. The hair, the uniforms, the set, most of the sets, some of the sets are digital, but very well done, and they did location shooting and stuff like that. Some of the shots were uncanny valley, but some of them were really good. Wow, that I believe that.
I would agree. And it goes back and forth. So there are moments that are very uncanny valley is a great way to describe it.
I liked it. People are saying, "Oh, this is what Star Trek should be." It's no, this is not what Star Trek.
No.
It's not a story. It's just a nice thing. I thought Danish, our resident pastor and a contributor, had an interesting observation. He said it was perhaps too reverent is how he described it. And he knows reverent, right?
Yeah. He's a pastor. Yeah.
It's treating them like they're saints, like they're holy figures.
Right.
And yes, in a sense, us Star Trek fans do revere them, but they are at their best when they are also human, when they are also real. And just the kind of ethereal nature of this whole thing treats everyone as kind of more spiritually than realistically, I would say. It's not a criticism. It's more of an observation, I would guess.
Right. And there were a lot of people that this had tremendous emotional resonance for. It didn't do it for me. So it's hard because I don't want to just sit here and go, I don't understand what, it doesn't do anything for me when I know that it did for so many people. But it rang just a little empty for me because there's just there's a lot of looking, and it's not a story that makes sense. But it was beautifully put together.
You can't imagine Kirk walking by Saavik and not going, Saavik. Right. It's there she is.
Is that Spock's son?
Yeah, he wouldn't just look.
And if he saw himself, he wouldn't just look. We know because he's seen himself many times.
Yeah.
And he
He'd be
always
like-
sucks.
It's like, you again? Are you the good one or the bad one? Are
Right.
you my aggressive side or my nice side?
What's going on? Are you someone pretending to be me? What's going on?
Are
This
you
is
a
a guy,
cameloid?
he has seen doubles of himself many, many times already.
Yeah. Are you my ex-girlfriend?
Right.
You know,
Are you from the future? Are you from the past? What's going on? Yeah.
you know, and when he sees Spock, you think he'd say, Spock.
Hi, Spock.
Spock. No, you just go, Spock.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know, but it's beautiful and the music is amazing. Yeah, like you can't believe it when you look at the credits. You're like, oh. And it's, you know, Nimoy has been in their films before. This is all, you know, his widow, Susan Nimoy, is an executive producer, you know, so the family's approving, you know, there's no resurrecting people without their permission, you know.
Right.
This is all SAG approved type stuff, as it were. Shatner's involved, the Nimoy family's involved, Gary Lockwood's involved. I assume the family of whoever played Ensign or Yeoman Colt must be involved because they keep on using, you know, they keep on using her. There was someone named Crusher there, which no one knows what that is. I'm going to try to figure that out.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to you finding out all the details.
Yeah, we're going to do a full breakdown when there's been some back and forth emails. We're working on it. I think Sam did a great job playing all the different Kirks, and obviously he was super into it, you know.
Yeah, no, he did. Again, like I said, no criticism, just confusion.
Indeed, but no, it's absolutely worth it, and it's gotten a lot of buzz, and you know that if you look at it just as a proof of concept thing, you could absolutely put Shatner Kirk into a Star Trek production easily. Doing all of it.
Yes,
not like a whole not like a whole movie.
You wouldn't want to do a lot because, as we were saying, it goes in and out of. It works and then it doesn't, and it works and then it doesn't, and it takes you right out of it when it doesn't. So,
right, but I mean, if you look at the recent Indiana Jones movie, there was like 20 minutes of de-aged Harrison Ford that was amazing. You know, the technology's there to do this stuff now. It's expensive, but it's there, and it's getting better every day.
This is a little disturbing.
Yeah.
For me, but they also released some interviews with this that were really interesting. They had one with Shatner, one with George Takei, and one with Robin Curtis, sort of talking about their Star Trek histories and their own history. The Shatner one was really good.
And it just as a, you know, behind the scenes thing, they shot it in a virtual set. So it was a movie era Enterprise bridge, and they built a real movie era chair. Dave Blass, I think, built the chair. And Shatner was totally blown away by the virtual set, apparently.
Yeah, Michael Okuda posted something about how he thought that he went up to touch it and thought that it was real, which is cool.
Yeah.
But he said some really interesting things in his interviews. I think it's worth watching the whole thing, and a couple of highlights for me and his. I liked his phrase about Gene Roddenberry because he said he was a wonderfully creative guy who made it difficult for people to be creative around him, which obviously that isn't true the whole time. I mean, everyone on Star Trek was pretty creative, but he was difficult in his own way. And so, and he was talking of the movie years and later. So that was interesting. He talked about making Star Trek V and that he would do it so differently now. His regrets over not getting to know DeForest Kelley better, and his friendship with Nimoy, and a lot of other stuff.
And of course, he said he'd love to be in Star Trek again if it could somehow figure out a way to do it.
And pay him.
Yeah.
Okay, I added that.
It's implied. Yeah. I mean, the Takei one was nice, but it was kind of like, we've heard all this before.
I've heard it. But Robin Curtis's was great. Like, she talked about being so nervous filming Star Trek 3 and how Leonard Nimoy would work with her before every take and help her be her Vulcan self. You know, it was, and so much stuff in there. You should just watch it because it's good quality content there.
So let's move on to 2025. Something that we know is coming next year is Strange New Worlds Season 3. Chatter about Strange New Worlds at Star Trek New Jersey, which you were at.
I was. It was a very slightly strange panel.
Yeah. So we have a bit of a recap of the Ethan Peck Anson Mount panel. They talked up the murder mystery episode. as, on par of weirdness with the musical episode. So again, kind of like what we've been hearing from other people, it does sound like that episode is freaky deaky. Whatever's going on, I think they're going to be portrayed as characters of some sort. I think,
but it won't be in black and white because we asked.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We did ask, and he said it was a fair question. I think it would be kind of cool if they did black and white. I mean, it's been done before, obviously.
Yeah, but they talked a lot about genre and how the show is using genre to get, not like for the audience to get excited, and also to keep the actors engaged and excited. And that something Anson Mount said that was funny. He said that Henry and Akiva, the showrunners, like getting in trouble. And that he stopped going up to them to say, like, are you sure that we should do this? Because he says they're always right, is what he says.
I liked when Ethan Peck said that he's been talking about wearing a scant on the show. I do know, because I remember Rebecca and Celia talked about how it's up to the actresses what they wear on any given episode. So sometimes they're in the female scant. I guess I don't need to call it a scant when
a scant is a scant.
A scant is a scant. Yeah. So and sometimes they're in slacks, I think, and so I think he's going to do it. Knowing him, I'd love to see it. So yeah, I'm sure he's got great legs, right? Because he works out.
He works out. He's very buff.
Yeah.
There was also a great moment when someone asked about a possible Muppet episode, which we know because it's something Akiva said, we could do anything. And Anson Mount was just so baffled and was like, where are you guys getting this from? Because, he's not reading interviews about his show. So he doesn't know the crazy stuff that's being talked about.
I kind of hope they never do it because it's kind of the obvious thing to do, and it's already been done, even though a musical had been done before. But yeah, I hope they never do it.
Yeah, so. I don't really want to see that. I mean, it was interesting because someone got up and asked what they thought Strange New World's message was, which is a leading question. It's a challenging question because that's, I think, what a lot of, the people who love it say it's there and the people who don't love it say it's not there. So Anson again sort of talked about like genre and how Star Trek can be a lot of things. But Ethan said it's really still about exploration.
And he also talked, I thought what he had to say about inclusivity and diversity, and he talked about the episode with the non-binary character as something important on the show.
Well, because it was catalytic for him, for his character.
Yeah, it's a good listen. We're going to have more from there. The Strange New World actresses had a panel, and we're going to have some more stuff from New Jersey. So keep an eye on this site. The thing that we've been doing all week long, which is worth just reading word for word, is this is Nanav week on the site. Nanav visitor. Laurie did a ridiculously long interview with the
poor Nana. I was like, I hope you have some time. And she just started laughing.
And I remember when you were trying to edit it out, and I'm like, look, let's not try to turn this into one. Let's do a week of segments. So we've been spreading it out, and we've put up 3 so far. The 4th will go up on Friday. But, it's an honest, frank interview with her talking, about what it was like being a woman in Star Trek personally, and then what she's learned as she's talked to all of these women from the original series, guest stars, up through to, modern day people on the new shows.
And writers. She talked to writers and people who worked on. She talked to so many people. And the thing is, I mean, it's sort of an interview, but it's sort of a conversation.
Yeah, so there's a lot of you in this as well, and I'm not saying, I like that. It is a conversation where you are batting ideas back and forth.
Right, and because for 2 reasons. I think one, because I grew up reading a lot of really interesting Rolling Stone interviews in my 20s and was like, that's a cool way to interview somebody. But also because really the nature of the book, it got me all fired up. Like as I'm reading, I was getting excited and writing things down and talking to everybody in my life about the things that I was reading, even the non-Star Trek fans, because it's about women. You know, it's about a lot of different and our society. So that was the approach I had for our conversation, was not to just do a Q&A, but to really just go back and forth. I found everything she had to say so interesting, and the journey she went on was fascinating to me.
Yeah, I love how she talked about becoming a Star Trek fan because she kind of had to study Star Trek to, you know, and go back to original series stuff, to, you know, have these conversations, and what she had to say about Roddenberry and Berman, and, you know, not criticizing, but just kind of being aware of, you know, how things were different in the 60s and how even things were different in the 90s for women, and you know, not harsh, but honest.
Yeah, and she's harsh when she needs to be about what was going on. And some things you can almost infer as you're reading it, because she wasn't out to do a hit piece or trash anybody. And she understands an expression she used was, you know, someone can be caught in the amber of their time. I think that's how she described Gene Roddenberry. So, you know, she has a lot of understanding. She actually got some great insights from Brannon Braga. Like, she talked to so many people, but I love the sections where she got really in depth with the actresses and stuff like that, because it was just so fascinating to me to read. And I mean, I'm younger than she is, but I'm old enough to remember all those eras. I was working at MTV in the 90s, so it was a very interesting book for me to read, and I feel very lucky that we got to have the conversation we did.
So the book, again, which you reviewed on the site a few weeks ago, is called
Star Trek, Open a Channel, A Woman's Trek. I know it is a pricey book. I would say it's well worth it because you're going to reread it a whole bunch.
Right. I mean, the surprising thing is it's a full color, illustrated, glossy coffee table book about a very serious subject with lots of pictures.
Right. And that has to do with the way she was asked, do you want to write a book about women in Star Trek? And it was going to be like pictures and then things about why the female characters in Star Trek are inspirational. And she turned it into something else that is magnificent.
Right.
And still does that. She still talks about why those characters are important and the influence they had and all the positives. But she also looks under the surface to talk about what was actually going on.
I think it's time to talk a little Lower Decks.
It is time to talk a little Lower Decks.
Before we get to our review, we should have mentioned this last week, but I interviewed Don Lewis.
I interviewed Don Lewis.
I get it's all you, me. Which one of us? You know, we're all the same person.
I could have sworn it was me interviewing Don Lewis.
It was I'm gaslighting you. Laurie, that was not you. That was me.
Oh my God! Wait till Don Lewis finds out.
Okay, tell us about how I interviewed Don Lewis.
Well, you interviewed Don Lewis actually about last week's episode and about Captain Freeman in general. I think one of your favorite things that she said was when she told you that she keeps telling Mike McMahon that Captain Freeman needs a gummy.
She does. She's a little wound up, I would say. Is. But less wound up than she used to be.
Yes. And she said that Mariner and Freeman have learned from each other and taken on some of each other's qualities, which has helped their relationship, but also they've seen the positives in each other and sort of taken those in, which I thought was insightful.
And even after taking down the giant bat, she's still haunted by Starbase 80.
Right. And so here's the phrase that I thought was really interesting that she said. She said, you asked if she was going to keep being haunted by Starbase 80. And she said, I think it's going to keep haunting her until she has a face-to-face with her alter ego. Mm. I think the doubles story, and I said this when we saw it the first week, that it's going to come back. There's something between Boimler and her, and we'll talk about this as we get into the episode, this week's episode.
Now, I didn't buy your theory, but I'm now renting your theory, I guess. It's certainly plausible. So let's talk about Gods and Angles, which was listed incorrectly on some other websites as Gods and Angels, which I guess makes more sense, but it wasn't that. I mean, I liked it. I said I wasn't going to do this, but it's probably my least favorite of the season.
Same. My overall impression was that I thought the jokes were fast and funny and furious and fabulous, but the story was kind of predictable and a little meh.
There's an irony here in that it was a mid-season bottle episode, which is, traditional. And like so many of those, the B story was the better story.
Yes.
The Boimler story was the better story.
But it couldn't have been, and it wasn't enough to be an A story.
No. Yeah, I mean, the A story was kind of this fun, like, mashup of so many Star Trek tropes. I mean, you've got the super being, you got the energy beings, you've got the diplomacy crisis.
Right, the warring factions, the falling in love of the one member of each of the warring factions.
They're not hiding it. I think they're leaning into how, we're gonna run through all, like 5 or 6 Star Trek tropes all at once. You've got the kind of Ensign Gomez kind of character with Ollie, who's really, but the whole point of this episode is look how much Mariner's grown.
Right. And like to me, I mean, it just was so obvious that was the whole point of it from the minute she was introduced.
Right.
So they added some good, fun details. Like the demigod thing made me laugh. So because it goes back to Apollo.
She's Zeus's granddaughter.
Right.
And so Mariner says, didn't Kirk kick his ass, which is wrong. Kirk kicks Apollo's ass, but Apollo is the son of Zeus. So therefore, ipso facto, do the math, she could be the daughter of whoever, I forget the name of the character, but from Who Mourns for
Apollo.
Adonais. Yeah, no, but who was the...
Oh, Carolyn Palamas.
Right. Okay, so I think there was a version of the script where she got pregnant and then they removed that.
So there was, which is a funny thing because, just a little history on that, it was in the James Blish adaptation, which all of us who had nothing else when we were kids and there wasn't all this Star Trek stuff, we read those over and over. And in that, at the very end, they find out that she's pregnant. And so for many years, I, for some reason, thought that was in the episode, but it wasn't. It's
a deep cut, but they were more having fun with the godlike being. There was a joke about how Q's, and all of that. But it was really about, I thought they were, one of the digs on this show in season 1 was that Mariner was annoying. And I think they were trying to make this character annoying.
I never found Mariner annoying, but I really found this character annoying.
Yeah.
I mean, not in a, I didn't like watching her way, but like, oh my God, you're terrible kind of way.
Well, yeah, because she was lying and, she was doing horrible, she wasn't listening, and the way she interrogated the poor Spillet circle, which was fun. The good cop, bad cop scene I thought was pretty funny. I mean, there's a lot of funny moments. This episode is full of funny moments. I did
so many funny moments. Like I watched it a couple of times before I even started taking notes. And I just laughed out loud so many times.
Yeah, it's absolutely worth watching for sure. I guess, maybe I'm getting too precious, as you almost think of every episode of this is 20% of the remaining episodes. If you think of, there's 5 remaining episodes, this is 20% of our remaining lower decks. And you go, well, I'd like to know, because the whole like Mariner's responsible now, we kind of got that in the first 4 episodes of this season. Like they've covered that ground pretty well. And they're like, no, we really want you to know that she is no longer a chaos agent. And to prove that, we're going to bring a chaos agent who's more chaotic than Mariner ever was, and have Mariner take her under her wing, and then realize that she actually was misunderstanding her. And then they have then everything comes full circle with the brig at the end. I mean, it was so on the nose.
Yeah, I think that's what it was for me too, and predictable along the way.
But there's still a lot of great dialogue about the cubes and the orbs. One of my favorite moments was when the cubes and the orbs left the ship, and you're just getting like this weird play-by-play by Ransom. You don't see him, but you could hear him talking to the captain, and it's going, they could become anything. They could become anything. It's like, oh, they're just becoming a giant. They're not creative at all,
I still like at the very beginning when they run into each other in the corridor, the cubes and the orbs, and they're insulting each other, and the orb says, "You wish you had curves like this, you pointy freak." And as soon as that happened, I'd started laughing, and that just, Freeman complaining like, now the orbs are complaining about the edges. because there's so many edges on starships.
Right, and the cubes didn't like Article 10 of the treaty because
it had the zeros too round.
yeah, no, so it was, which again, like, petty aliens is a TNG trope, and they really had fun with that.
Yes.
Kudos for all of that kind of stuff.
One of my favorite moments was when, after they find the orb not glowing or whatever, and they find out it's the equivalent of naked, and then it's like, don't you understand? And Mariner's like, I don't understand. I admit I have no idea what it is that you're talking about, which made me laugh, and her delivery was great.
Well, why were cubes and orbs in the gym? I mean, like, lifting weights like that. I mean, just, we don't have to overthink this, but that makes zero sense. Why were they in the shower?
It was great.
Why was it wearing a towel? I mean, it just, but
all
still,
the details were fantastic. So let's talk about the other story.
Yeah, I've been wondering when they'd get back to the pad, right? The stolen pad.
Right.
The running gag in this is that everyone knew Boimler had the stolen pad, but they only noticed it was different because of the bevel, not because it was red, and I just realized I hadn't noticed it was red before, but it is red. So it is different.
Well, also the bevel, they said it was 3.7% deeper.
Yes.
That they noticed, but not that it was red.
It's obvious that all season long, he's been using this as a cheat sheet to boost his confidence because Beard Boimler is so much cooler than he is. But this gave us an opportunity to have Dr. Tana become a big part of the show because Beard Boimler is in Tana's book club.
Right. And he feels like, it's interesting because it was almost the same way Boimler is looking back at his old self because he became like he used to be. He was finally starting to get sort of comfortable with who he was. And then he meets this double. And now he's doing everything he can to be like the double. And, everyone tells him to be himself. No, he's got to be like his double. So part of that success involves joining Dr. Tana's book club.
Right. And Tendi even calls him out. He's like, remember the whole Hawaii thing, which was when he pretended to be from Hawaii. And this whole arc is kind of funny because Tendy's the one, no, be yourself. And and in the end, both because it worked out, no one's listening to her. I feel like she's going to be proven right in the end. I think this is all using the pad is going to come back to bite him on the ass.
Yeah, of course.
But it's working for now, apparently.
No, and Rutherford skipping off with him going, yay, that's our new plan. Just try to be like somebody else.
Of course, I'm just so glad to have Dr. Tana finally part of the show.
Oh, and she was great. She was definitely a highlight of this one.
They definitely leaned into her signature move, as it were, because when Boimler couldn't get her to use his nickname Flip, which is lame, right? He decided to speak her language, which was cursing.
It was. Well, so I interviewed Gillian Vigman.
Yes, you did. Now, you sound a lot like me when you did it, though, I think.
I had a filter so that my voice would sound just like you.
So should we run part of your interview where Gillian talks about the cursing?
Yes.
This episode highlighted, or it actually called out, he said, I'm going to speak in her language, not Haitian, cursing, right? So I'm wondering, so you had to do a lot of it in this episode. How do you perform knowing that half your dialogue is going to get bleeped? But how do you perform it knowing you're being bleeped? Does it change anything?
No, because here's the thing. I love swearing, and it's a real problem. I really love swearing. So for me, it's like, it's sort of a release, right? I mean, just like her, it's a release of like getting everything out. And so what I love so much about it is they'll write like a bleep or like a word in the script, but then they're like, just go crazy. So by the time I'm done with, especially like when the big fight happens and I'm getting to swear like no one's business with Boimler, I was so sweaty and so hyped up. By the time I was done, I felt like I was like on cocaine. I was like, yeah, oh yeah. And it is such a joyful release. And I think for someone like her, or as I would say, as Dr. Tana, I think the work that she does, it is life or death for a lot of the stuff she does, or she's trying to find, has to work within a very short parameter of finding a cure or some sort of vaccination or some sort of way to deal with some biological, disease or virus, which is taking over the ship or whatever, that the way she can let out some of that, stress is by a torrent of horrible, horrible, things to say. It is basically the verbal vomit that is counterintuitive to the work she's doing, but it gives her a sense of like, woo.
Wait, so you're ad-libbing some of your curses, or?
Oh yeah.
I love that.
I don't think they'd want to write the stuff I say.
So it just says bleep in the script, and you just go for it?
Yes, sir.
Oh, but she gave him.
I mean, there might be like, they may have written like an F word or the S word, but they're like, just go crazier, like add to that and think about how, and they might say like, the phraseology might be like, we want you to know that you have to use these words to say, what I'm going to do to you is I'm going to do this to you, and I'm going to do this to you. And when I get to this point, I'm going to put myself in here, and then I'm going to wear you like a puppet, or whatever I might want to say.
I love the idea of her just sitting there coming up with all kinds of great curses to use. It's, we talk a lot about how the animated characters look a lot like the real life ones. And with her, of course, she doesn't, but they certainly incorporated one of her favorite things into her character, or vice versa.
Yeah, she really goes for it. I mean, I want to hear the raw recordings. I kind of always thought that they would write in what she was supposed to say. So if she was supposed to say, shithead or whatever, but it sounds like they kind of just let her go wild, maybe have a few suggestions. And I'm curious to see where she goes with this. I'm also curious to hear what Jack Quaid, because when Jack Quaid lays into it, like, they bleeped everything. And I have a feeling like he went over the top. He probably did. He said some stuff that like they couldn't even come close to not bleeping because it was like too much.
We
whatever
need the
it
raw
was.
Tapes of this episode.
Yes, maybe they would never put that on the DVD, but that would be awesome.
But maybe
if
they'd
would.
let just you and me listen.
Oh, that would be pretty cool. Another thing that you got her to reveal
in my great interview with her, where we had such a rapport.
Yes, even though I vaguely remember doing it, but obviously I didn't. Anyway, was she does the cat noises.
Yes, that's after I listened to your interview with her. I mean, my interview with her, and then I watched it again and just kept thinking of her making all the cat noises and how she watched cat videos.
And she's even up for doing Tahana live action. She wants to, get in the makeup, and she said she'd jump around and do all the cat stuff. And so, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I had so much fun talking to her.
Obviously, very excellent interview. I almost feel like I was there. So where were we? Oh, so I loved the whole B story, and it incorporated well into the A story, I thought, because they kind of catch up to each other when Boimler shows up in the in the shuttle bay where the battle's happening. I mean, I didn't really understand the kind of weird lightning bolts that Ollie makes. They're kind of these limp lightning bolts, like what? Yeah, I don't know. Whatever.
But one ended up in Boimler's butt.
Yes, exactly. But there was a nice message, of how she realizes that using her god powers was not her true calling. Her true calling is engineering, which was kind of revealed earlier in the episode when she improves on the portable tractor beam, which
right. And then she has a power surge, which now we know why. It wasn't because of bad engineering.
And now she's part of engineering, and I don't know if we'll see more of her. She'll probably just be in the background, perhaps, because she's easily recognizable because she has the leaf hat.
Yes, it's not a hat.
Another good guest star. This episode didn't really. It was more self-referential with the show. I guess for the Easter eggs, it's more like, oh, that's kind of like Okona, that they're not, but it's not overt. They're more thematic, Easter eggs. But then the kind of more overt ones were related to the show itself, like going back to Brig and what she said at the Brig, and we get to see Tal Guy again. And
yeah, it was nice to see Tal Guy again. But there was a mention of Dixon Hill, and then there was I got curious about this one because there was Boimler said something about we've got a good Ronald B. Moore over here, and I know Ronald B. Moore's like visual effects, and so I was like, what is that? So I go to Memory Alpha, and then I realized, oh, they have characters named after him. And then immediately I picked the one that says comedian, and it's Joe Piscopo's character, who I didn't even know had a name, who was in The Outrageous Okana. So
I don't think I think
they showed it. I think they said, like, it said tonight. There was some kind of sign or something that had his name. No one
said the name, but yeah, it was, it's definitely a deep cut, which was fun. But yeah, that stood out when he says we gotta, I'm like, whoa, that was weird. Why did he?
Weird. Yeah. Like, what is that in reference to? A very deep cut.
I'm not saying there weren't Easter eggs. There certainly were. The previous episode had so many, everywhere you look, there's a piece of Enterprise, a piece of the original series, that kind of stuff. There were things on, Worf's weird chair was on the sled at the beginning. There was, there's some stuff here. If you look in the background, obviously, the whole, little tractor beam thing, Wesley Crusher was trying to work on one of those in TNG. Remember?
Right. Yeah.
And in fact, you could see Rutherford had one, and you could see it in the episode earlier. So Rutherford previously tried to make a mini tractor beam, I think. So yeah, but that's not really what this episode was trying to do. It was more trying to do the feels, not trying to do the callbacks as much.
Yep, agree. And I did love the end when she's in the brig and Mariner's sitting out there and she's like, tell me about your Gramps. Did he smite? And then she starts asking all these questions about Medusa. Like, I feel like she'd like me. Do the snakes have names? Those are such good questions.
They are good questions. Yeah, no, I mean, again, funny, predictable, filler. But I'm starting to want, even though we got more Ton, I'm like, what's up with Ton and Shax?
I know. Yeah.
We got a tiny bit of T'Lyn. We got a tiny bit of Billups. I love when when Mariner goes in the bridge and says, we know we shit the bed, but we want to change the sheets. And he's like, I know it's a metaphor. It's just a bad one.
It's bad. Yeah.
And it's like, God, you've got Paul, he's so funny. Use him, more Billups. But we're, and we've got almost no Shax this season. And Ransom, Ransom's just kind of solid in every episode. We don't get really.
I think he's been really good. He's being used really, really well.
We're not getting a lot of. I guess there's no growth for him. He's just kind of Ransom. He's kind of.
Oh yeah, no, he's not into growth. Just his muscles.
Yes. And he was worried that she's stealing. So who is stealing his kettlebells is the question. If it's not Ollie, it could be Ollie.
Ollie. Yeah.
It probably is her. But there's so many characters, and I assume this is coming soon, but Rutherford really hasn't had much to do this season at all.
No, he hasn't. Yeah. Well, I mean, he had fun with his double, but that was about it.
Yeah, but I thought that was going somewhere, and it didn't, so, Tendi, obviously we got some good stuff for her. So it's time to spread the love. I mean, I think that's it. I'm still liking the season. I kind of, I've been saying it's great that they're keeping the season arc on the back burner, but
it's time to have we're ready for some.
Just to drop a mention of it, it's still on the back burner. I know Mike feels like they overdid it last season, and I agree with that, but that doesn't mean totally ignore it. Like a single line, something in the background.
Yeah. No, this episode did have a bit of a bottle show filler vibe.
Yeah.
So, a little bit would have helped. But some of the best lines they've done in a while.
Yeah, the dialogue, always great. All right, so let's wrap things up. Bits of the week time. Mine is, as you guys know, I always love a little real world politics, Star Trek clashing. There was a congressional hearing last week on, well, technically it's on UFOs, right? but they call them UAPs now, which is Identified Aerial Phenomenon, I think.
Okay.
And there was an ex-NASA guy named Michael Gold there, and he gave when he was being sworn into Congress, the United States Congress, the venerated institution, as he gave the Vulcan salute as he was being sworn in, which I thought was pretty awesome. A little Star Trek on Capitol Hill. What do you got?
I just want to tell folks that we are already in the planning stages for Trek Talks 4. This is an annual online fundraiser. It's a whole day of Star Trek panels. John Billingsley is one of the people the main person organizing it with Trek Geeks. And we now have Trek Talks accounts on social. So I'm going to put links to all of them in the show notes. And if people want to stay updated on what the panels are that we're planning, we haven't announced anything yet, although we have already booked some, and I'm not going to say what they are, but we've got some really good stuff coming. So I will put up links to Facebook, Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram for you to follow Trek Talks and find out who's going to be there, what they're going to be talking about, and it's all happening in January.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun.
So that's it. We've got 4 more episodes.
I know.
To take us through the end of the year. Then we're on to 2025, Section 31, and more stuff.
And more to come.
So thank you for listening.
See ya.